This door had writing on it that said 1915. But is that actually when this door was renovated?
Or made?
Or made into the fit? But the putty is that hard in this that is completely dry and has solidified into a almost concrete-like paste. That takes about 100 years to happen.
Because what kind of putty is it?
It is linseed oil putty. So you have like a gypsum and linseed oil mixed together to produce a putty. The linseed oil has to dry out of it to make it go hard. It leaves a slight residue, which still would be soft after 50 years, and 100 years it becomes hard. The gypsum is solidified back into a solid mass. But even then it's crumbly. This is no longer crumbly, this is actually hard flakes and when you scrape, it's like you're scraping on concrete. I mean, I'm hardly putting it there, scratching it. And it takes longer than 100 years for that to happen. And it's not necessarily heat that makes it happen. It is oil, that oil dissipates at a set rate, but to heat-wise you need like 250 degrees, 300 degrees to make it happen faster.
Which you couldn't have done with this door.
No, the wood would have charred and...
So, I purchased this door. We found on the side writing that said 1915.
The chances are that was when this door was... these components were put together in this door. But the components themselves are probably older, probably by at least 50 years, if not more.
So somebody renovated this door in 1915.
Yes.
More than 100 years ago.
Yes.
So when we're looking at where this door came from, a small town in northeast Kansas, Alma, which had had a little boom time because of the natural limestone and the railroad running through it, this very nice door that came from a very nice house.
Yes. And here, it's been painted over the years, but you can see the original finish is more or less the same as what's on the other side.
Okay, so
actually, that finish, they would have sanded all of this down and put a stain that kept the wood grain on it. Yes?
Yeah.
And the front and back. That was probably in 1915. At some point in the future, somebody then painted white paint on it.
So you just basically did
Archaeology.
Door renovation archaeology, which actually tells us a little bit about the economy of Alma way before 1915, because this is one window pane that's part of a bigger door set with glass that is
bolted together.
Very expensive glass, bolted
Very
together.
expensive. I mean, these long bolts like that would have probably been made 150 years ago. To make a long bolt was a relatively expensive thing to do.
Yeah, makes sense. We didn't have the Industrial Revolution, the factories, they had to be handmade.
The chances are these were handmade to a degree and threaded to make bolts. There's bolts straight through the door, there's bolts through this. This has 3 bolts there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 11 bolts holding this together.
So we could probably do backward economics on what those types of bolts cost.
Yeah.
Back in 1870.
These are, the frames are rebate, which is still, it's not a unknown thing to do, but it was not a common thing to do for a door.
But we're talking a
This is
very
a high-end,
rural Kansas town.
high-end door. That's what I mean. Because it's a joiner took, or a carpenter took the time, probably days, to plane that down, rebate it, blah 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 blah. Unless it was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which puts it round about pre-Civil War. This was originally built.
So it would have had to have been a little bit after, I would think. But now that tells us
But
that...
I'm saying it's in that Civil War, just before, just after
Yes.
time period.
So there was, for a very isolated, newly frontier settled area of the American West.
This was a very posh, probably imported from Chicago or some other big city, piece taken in bits. I mean, this would have been made, but the glass would have been separate. It would have been in pieces, arrived, and a local cabinet maker would put it together, fit it, put it together, and then install it.
Okay. So this tells us that before the boom time, when they were, we know around the turn of the century in this town, Alma, somebody had started a factory, I say factory, but a kiln, processing limestone down to fly ash, I believe,
Yes.
that had been making a lot of money for the town. We know that was the boom time, just before World War I. But what you're suggesting is that there was money flowing through that town, and we're talking right now a town of 800 people, and there's the next nearest town, so at 15 miles at best.
Yes.
So even before
the people
boom
that
time.
started the business, the chances are they had a business that was successful but not as big as it's going to become.
Right.
They built a house, they had this imported from somewhere.
Interesting.
So I mean, you can say that this was from a very wealthy person's house. That's it.
So this door tells us one hell of a lot about the economy of a very remote part of the American frontier 140, 150 years ago, at least.
I would say probably 140 is a good guess.
Okay. So Alma is it's a very remote, isolated country hill town.
Yeah.
And
the reason I say this is because there's oddities in this. Not just the bolts, but if you actually look at the end, you can see that this is not flat square, this is angled.
Yep, I see that. Yeah, it's angled in.
Right?
Towards the top.
To the
looking
outside.
at it. Yeah.
Meaning that it was meant to be bedded in. When you put this together, you have a frame with a lip.
Mm-hmm.
You put putty bedding in, push it in place, and then skew it.
And then you fill that little
That
gap.
That gap here has been filled with putty.
That's your early weatherproofing.
And that weatherproofs this seam.
And that's why we're keeping that frame you're talking about. Because it's already beveled to the exact angle.
It's been beveled to mate with this. Either that, or this was made to open.
But do you see any evidence of hinges on the sides of this?
It was made to open. It was never fitted to open, but it was made to open.
Amazing what you can learn from a door.
Well, as part of why repairing is a better word. I like to use repair. Repairing old structure of houses. You learn how they built them, which is in itself
very indicative of the ecosystem,
yeah,
the economy,
the
transportation,
economy,
logistics.
I mean, one of the I lived in, there was parts of ships because it's islands.
One of the houses.
Ready source of wood.
One of the houses you lived in growing up in Scotland.
Yeah.
On one of the islands on the northeast coast.
It had a mast sectioned out to make roof beams. It had keel timbers as headers above the door. It's a stone house. Those oak timbers, I really don't know how old they were, but they stood nearly 18 inches tall, a foot deep, and they're 4 foot long. And there's no bow in them. They're dead straight, with 5-6 tons of stone stacked on top of them to make a wall.
Now this is on an island with how many trees, or what kind of trees?
Not a lot of trees. There are trees, but not a lot of them.
How many? How many would be big enough to make timbers like this?
Oh, a couple hundred at the most.
How big was the island?
The main island is 30 miles one way and 40 miles the other. And it's like 2 squares. There's a square and then there's a square. And these are sycamores that were planted in Victorian times.
Not timber framing wood,
No,
not shipbuilding wood.
They're not oaks. I mean, there is no oaks on Orkney Islands.
Well, that was my point, I guess.
Yes. There's really no hardwoods. There is hardwoods, but they are very small. They never grow more than 15 foot high, and if it's a foot the round, is as thick as plant. No, there is no wood source on the islands to get big, heavy timbers.
Right.
Whether it be pine, oak, whatever.
And what was the name of the island?
Well, it was the main island in Orkney, which actually official name is Pomona.
Which is where not where you grew up.
I grew up on the Stronsey Island, which is more isolated again. But this house, you have to remember that there was a lot of shipwrecks in the days of sailing, and there was even wrecking went on. The more dubious kind of pastime.
Wrecking being the sort of almost intentional, if you're really devious, sinking of ships and then going out
and raiding them
for everything they're worth.
For everything you can get.
Lumber, goods, supplies. Some people did it, from what I understand.
There is a certain amount of the wreckers. Some wreckers, if they found anybody alive, they dispatched them. Other wreckers just basically left them to their own devices. But you have to remember that where the ships wrecked were on outcroppings. Usually you'd have to get a boat to get to them. And they did it because the authorities couldn't get to them as that quick. Cornish wreckers in Cornwall were doing it on the mainland.
Right.
So you had cavalry units and things like that would charge in to rescue people from the wreckers. In Orkney and the west coast of Scotland, it's far more isolated, and they did it on skerries and rocks that are out.
So this is kind of a form of piracy.
Yes. Then again, the last pirate in British coastal waters was actually an Orcadian.
Orcadian Scottish.
Orcadian Scottish. From what I'm...
Just to differentiate from Americans, have heard of Arcadians.
Yeah.
The French, Canadians.
Yeah. Orcadians are the men of Orkney, and they had reputation probably worse than the Arcadians.
Hold on. Okay. Sorry.
So, No, this process of if you're repairing or renovating old house, I was going to call it furniture. Some people do describe windows and doors and that as furniture, but part of the construction of an old house, any part of it, one of the things you have to do is understand how it was constructed. Then you can understand what you can do to modernise or to repair what you're actually working on.
And you, as a master carpenter, woodworker, who grew up around these sorts of old...
by my experience of seeing this stuff, dealing with stuff, repairing this stuff, I have gained the experience of saying, I understand how this was put together, so I understand how to take it apart to put it back together again.
So in a sense, this is a form of, if you wanted to look at it, a form of experimental archaeology. That comes from experience. And since you're working with an archaeologist here, behind this camera, phone, you also are kind of, in a sense, describing, explaining, and demonstrating a form of experimental archaeology that more applies to understanding.
Being familiar with the area as well, I can look at this and say, I see this. You, on the other hand, who are familiar with the area, can go, well, that ties in with what I know.
Exactly. That's where this sort of archaeology is not just one discipline of digging holes in the desert.
No, this is the bit.
It's multidisciplinary.
In this modern world, we become very used with the fact that conveniently made furniture by IKEA, you need a Phillips screwdriver and
maybe an Allen wrench.
And you can put it together. That does not make you a cabinet maker.
No.
But this
and this isn't even the door.
The start of the industrial age is when you start seeing this kind of thing, and this is where a cabinet maker probably supervised the design, and this is the requirements for this. And then machine tools put in these rebates and made.
We say machine tools, but we're not talking electrical.
No. But I'm saying is like a steam engine driving a large router.
Gotcha.
Or
which would have been plausible in 1870. 1868.
But even a water powered machine.
Right. And Chicago was the main. You said Chicago, but that seems very likely.
Yes.
Because that's where the railroad lines ran.
But I'm saying Chicago because of the railroads and such like.
That's what actually turned Alma into before it became a town famous for shipping out fly ash or whatever, it was cattle. And getting cattle to the Chicago market was a big deal. And because the area around here is so rugged and rocky, it's not worth putting to the plow. Instead, we raised cattle here.
But I'm saying the machine made that in a big long length.
Right. So to wrap here quickly, no.
But I'm saying is you could send things in pieces.
So it kind of was IKEA, but you needed a craftsman to put it together. So an actual. So you had. Okay, that's a great point. Actually, they were kind of starting this modular system.
Yes.
Okay, now maybe you couldn't do it in your college dorm room.
Yeah.
With an Allen key and whatever little screwdriver they sent you. But a cabinet maker in a small town could put that together.
Yes, but this piece was probably the piece that came from Chicago.
Cattle going one way, nice furniture coming the other way.
And this piece over here, which is the side pieces for that, was probably made by a cabinet maker here.
Because that's how you fitted it
Yes.
to the door frame.
Yeah. You got the door frame, you got all the pieces, you put them together, then you made the frames that you put them in the houses.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you for that insight, Malcolm, because this just shows how diverse what we do is and how it isn't just relegated to dig square holes in the desert 3 meters by 3 meters or 1 meter by 1 meter.
But it's also the fact that this area was not Joe Blogg's farmer turned cabinet maker and bang things together. They were importing high end materials.
Which meant you had to have skilled tradesmen that could exist only to do this.
Yes.
It wasn't just a jack of all trades, every man.
I'm the jack of all trades because I into everything. But the person who put this together here was not a jack of all trades.
They knew very well.
Yes.
And that meant a very tiny town in a very rugged, remote part of northeast Kansas had at least one highly skilled cabinet maker, whereas in other areas you might have just had farmers, a few of whom might have been decent carpenters. That tells us another thing about the economics of that little town in the abolitionist country of northeast Kansas.
And that person may have been an immigrant from God knows where.
Well, they
turned up here to farm, blah, 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 and suddenly found out he could make use of his trade.
Well, a lot of them were European immigrants escaping the Napoleonic Wars and the chaos ensuing by that. Well, thank you, Malcolm. That was very enlightening. I think this audience and students might, from this, gain an appreciation of how there's a lot more than just the Indiana Jones aspect to archaeology. It's actually it's putting together this big picture from small, but very telling things, such as how a door is constructed.
I'll use the example of Egyptians. You have an awful lot of Egyptian artifacts that people are really interested in that belong to rich people.
Right.
Because they were made out of good quality stuff.
Yeah.
So they lasted. And you could dig them up
and this is...
But your average Joe Blogs, it's not that they didn't have nice things. It's a lot harder to find them because they were not looked after or cared for in the same degree.
Right. They weren't curated to last.
Yeah.
And this door was, and that's why, I saw it on Facebook Marketplace for $50.
We're working on it, like I said, it's at least 100 years is the minimum.
Gotcha.
But this was renovated over 100 years ago.
So that 1915 date.
Before.
So this is its annual 50 or 100-year renovation.
Well, it missed the 50 year.
Well, see, the thing is, Alma lost that economic boom economy after the railroad moved.
My initial fear when I started doing this was that there was going to, in that grain, was going to be a white substance.
Fungus?
No, lead paint.
I'm glad we don't have that. So this predates lead paint, too.
No, well, lead paint's been around for quite a while.
Oh, okay.
But
Didn't know that.
That's the original finish. That brown there is the original finish.
Okay.
So somebody treated this with something like shellac or
tongue oil
or something like that to have that nice wood grain effect. And somebody at a later date put this paint on it.
Now, let's find out who that person is and make them pay for their crime. But, okay, again, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks, Malcolm. I think this provides a very good insight into how analysis of the details. And this is like Sherlock Holmes style,
Yes.
inductive, deductive reasoning. Can tell us quite a lot about an economy, a history of a single community without ever knowing a thing about it.
Yes.
And I'm going to wrap this here as soon as you finish your statement.
I was going to say, this is where old people or older skills, if you understand those skills to a degree, it will help understand this construction.
Right.
So to be versed in older skills, as you are, and as I am, we can deduce from this. Whereas if you don't actually know how somebody might put something together, it's harder to do.
Very good. I'm going to wrap this. Yep. Thank you, Malcolm. Malcolm Harkus, everyone. Orcadian Scotsman in rural northeast Kansas. And my partner in a milling operation. All right. Well, till the next one we do. Yeah. This was fascinating. Thank you.
That's it.
Cool. Cheerio. And stuff.